thing that people that watch your podcast might be interested in, and that's the $25 million that went into Erika's LLC, is going to be evidence in this trial. And the jury will know that Tom funneled all those millions from clients to Erika. That's going to be a big deal.
That's going to be a big deal, especially as the days of the trial move on. And I mean, like, for everyone who doesn't know, like, this trial was originally slated for May. Like, it's already been pushed out by Tom and his defense team to August. They just tried to push it out again, and the judge said no.
Twice they've tried in the last couple weeks. Like they keep asking. One of the other things that people might find interesting about the trial is that it's been severed from the CFO slash bookkeeper. I mean, he's not a CPA, so I feel kind of weird calling him a CFO. But the guy who did the books at Girardi Keese, Chris Camone, his trial's now been severed from Tom's. So now we have a little bit pared down trial. So I think it'll probably last a few days less than we thought. We were originally told 12 days. So now they're talking about 9 or 10-day trial. So we'll see. We should have a verdict, but within a couple of weeks of the start of the trial, and people can finally stop saying the victims are alleged.
People can finally, I mean, do you think it's going to be that short? Like, it is slated for like 12 days. Like, is that likely? Like, that it's going to just be 1, 2, 3 and it's going to be over? Or will this go on past the 12 days, you think?
I mean, I don't think it's going to go past 12 days now that they severed Camone off. I think that'll narrow the trial down a little bit more, although we'll hear about Camone and some of his side fraud. We heard that there'll likely be testimony from a woman who was on Girardi Keese's payroll that's been labeled Chris Camone's fiance, or he originally met her as a sex worker, that she'll be testifying. And I don't think now the prosecution really wants her to testify now that it's severed. And it does seem kind of odd and a little bit salacious. Like, if Camone's severed off the trial and it's not really about his fraud, it's about what Tom did, why is the person, that Camone was giving money to being brought into Tom's trial? Is that for headlines, a distraction? I mean, Tom loves a distraction. I mean, look what he's done with Erika, and Erika using her platform to convince everyone that Tom's incompetent. And here we are months and years later from that narrative, and Tom's still competent. His phone went off in the courtroom on Friday in the pretrial hearing, and he literally, like, his phone, his flip phone, the famous flip phone, rings, and he like turns it off, and he acts like kind of like a little kid, like, oh, sorry. But he was so with it. It's like, I saw a reporter later tweet to one of her followers, the judge should remand him to custody once he's convicted. It's obvious he's competent. I mean, it really is. It's become silly at this point.
And I wonder, like, you don't think there's any diminished mental capacity just for age, like being 85? And like, does that even, I don't know. I mean, I'm a lawyer who hasn't practiced in a long time. Like, does that even matter if it's any diminished mental capacity for age? I don't know. I should know, I guess.
Sure. I do think that you would take into account his age and his brain health history. Sure. I mean, of course, when you're talking about someone's capacity to stand trial for his crimes. But, there's a very wide gap between some diminished mental capacity and not being able to stand trial. And the way I explain it to some people, we got to think about it like this. Tom, in the sense of a lawyer, is like an elite athlete, like an Olympic athlete. Like, the Olympics are going on right now. Olympic athletes are different than me and you, right? So when they're operating at their full, ability, they're far above, supersede everyone around them. So even when they're diminished, they're still killing it, right? That's really how you got to look at Tom. When he was at the top of his game, he's one of the best trial lawyers in California, in the United States, and even globally, because he was a part of an invitation only lawyers group where they had 500 plaintiff lawyers, 500 defense attorneys in the world. And Tom was in that group and held an office in that group as well at one time. So even when Tom's diminished, he's running circles around everyone else. So him wearing slippers to court, letting his phone ring and saying fuck you to the prosecutor in the courtroom in front of the judge, and shuffling around, walking slow, trying to look as, fragile as possible, and wearing these crazy looking outfits when the dude wore nothing but custom suits his whole life. I mean, it's like a circus.
It is like a circus. Do you think we're going to get that circus like to the fullest effect in the 12 days if it only lasts 12 days? Like, I mean, don't you think we're going to have some of this circus again?
I do think it'll be somewhat, Phil circus like. I mean, Erika's not going to be there. Erika's not testifying. So, that will keep the craziness down a notch. We also have a very important election going on right now in society. And I think people are extremely distracted by the election and the assassination attempt recently, and rightfully so. This is an important time in our nation's history, and I can understand why people are caught up in the election. But what's interesting about Tom's case is that he funneled victims' money to politicians for decades, and none of them have given the money back to the victims. So like in the Bernie Madoff case, most people have heard of that fraud case. It's one of the biggest ones, in US history. The politicians voluntarily gave back their donations. No one had to go knock on their door. I've called a number of offices. I've been relentless with my own congressman, Brad Sherman. I can't get a meeting even with anyone. I thought, I wanted to meet with Congressman Brad Sherman because, I thought I live in his district. I live up the street from his office. I really believed I would just go meet with them and say like, hey, if I could show you a way to help the Girardi Keese victims and you be the hero, would you be interested? Could you champion a cause to get the lawmakers aware that they have this money that belonged to victims and get it returned? It's the best chance victims have of getting some of their money back. They're not likely to get any in the bankruptcy.
No, they're not. And I'm sure that he would love to be a champion and a hero, but not when you're Kimberly Archie and you actually want the money back.
Well, if Brad Sherman's people watch this or hear about it, tell them to call me. I'm still available to talk if they want to be the heroes, because someone's going to need to step up once the public really grasps that these politicians have victim money. Burn victims, widows, orphans, cancer patients, people who buried their parents at a young age. That's just horrific to keep the money from people